Welcome to my final project. In this video, you are going to learn about my experiences while teaching my 2 science lessons in my field experience. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Science lesson number 1, Habitat Walk. For this lesson, the students began by engaging in a habitat walk. On the habitat walk, they had their science journals and a magnifying glass to lead them on their journey. After the habitat walk, I gathered the class back to the classroom, and we completed a Venn diagram comparing the habitat outside the school to another habitat. After completing the habitat walk and the Venn diagram, the science lesson number 1 was complete. In this lesson, based off the learning cycle text, my students were considered to be in the concrete operational stage of development. Therefore, my students needed reality and concrete objects in order to understand the world around them. Therefore, doing a nature walk or a habitat walk was a very beneficial experience for my students because they actually got to go out and experience reality. In the Science as Formative Assessment text by Keeley, I used fact number 61 in this lesson, or think, pair, share. At the beginning of the lesson, I had students think, pair, and then share before venturing into the habitat walk. Finally, like this lesson, like many of the science lessons I'll probably teach in the future, are balancing act. According to the article, The 3 Legs to Stand On. The understandings about the nature of science gained from this lesson is that science addresses questions about the natural and material world. Specifically, scientists study the natural and material world. This lesson was very age appropriate. The students were engaged, and there was a lot of evidence of learning, specifically in the students' science journals and the reports while creating the Venn diagram. Also, the standard for 2nd grade aligned well with the lesson. To assess the students' understanding, we created a Venn diagram as a class. Though students were not held accountable on an individual basis, the students were held accountable on a whole class basis for their understanding of what they gained during the lesson. The Venn diagram showed me that the students could effectively compare and contrast 2 separate habitats. Overall, I feel the students reacted very positively to the lesson. During the habitat walk, students would run up to me, excited to share what they had discovered. In addition, the students' journals were filled with pictures and notes of what they discovered. Overall, I feel that this lesson went very well. Specifically, the scavenger hunt, where the students were able to explore and discover the habitat. However, something that did not go very well was the preparation. The day of the lesson, I made lots of changes last minute in order to fit the need of my teacher. This kind of threw me off a little bit, but it wasn't that bad. If I were going to make a change to the lesson, I would make the Venn diagram more interactive, allowing students to place the specific topic into the Venn diagram instead of me placing the topic into the Venn diagram. Overall, though, I am pleased with the Habitat Walk science lesson. Science lesson number 2, Sink or Float. For this formative assessment science lesson, the students were given objects, and with these objects, they were given a bucket of water. With their bucket of water and their objects, the students placed each object in the water one at a time to determine if the object would sink or float. Since my students are in the concrete operational stage, according to the learning cycle text, they need reality and concrete objects in order to understand a concept. Therefore, giving the students actual objects and allowing them to conduct the experiment was a very helpful way to help them grasp the concept of what objects would sink or float. In this lesson, I used fact number 34, look back. At the end of the lesson, I had students cite specific things that they learned during the sink or float experiment. This is based off the Science Formative Assessment text by Keeley. The understandings about the nature of science that connects with this lesson is that scientific investigations use a variety of methods. Specifically, science investigations begin with the question, and scientists use different ways to study the world. Overall, I felt that this lesson was very appropriate for the age of the students. Though, when I looked up the lesson online, I found the lesson being used with younger students. However, I felt the students still gained a lot from the lesson based off my formative assessment. To assess the students at the end of the lesson, I created a checklist. The checklist was my way of checking what the students learned from the lesson. If an item sank, the students checked or shaded in the sink section of the chart. If the item floated, the students checked or shaded in the float section of the chart. Though this chart made sense to me, I found that second graders struggled with it a little bit. Overall, the students had a really positive reaction to the lesson. They had a blast being able to explore and determine which objects were going to sink or float. I think students really enjoyed the inquiry-based nature of the lesson. Overall, I'm really pleased with the lesson, and I would definitely do it again if I were in a second grade lesson. Specifically, what went well was the fact that the students were just given time to explore. Something that didn't go as well was the checklist. I think if I were going to do this again, I wouldn't give second graders a checklist formatted in the way that it was. I think a chart that allows the students to circle, sink, or float would have been a little bit more straightforward. That would be the change that I would make to the lesson. However, that being said, I feel the benefits outweighed the negatives, and I love this lesson, the students love this lesson, and I would for sure do it again.